A CEO walks into a homeless shelter and is stunned to see his ex-wife of a year holding a newborn baby. The shocking reunion leads to revelations that will change both their lives forever. The harsh winter wind bit at the exposed faces of those gathered at the modest homeless shelter on the outskirts of the bustling city. The shelter, lit by dim, flickering lights, served as a lifeline for those weathering storms that life had unfairly unleashed upon them. It was here that Alexander "Alex" Hunt, a renowned CEO and billionaire, found himself on a frigid Thursday evening. Alex was a man who commanded boardrooms, steered billion-dollar deals, and inspired awe in all who worked under him. Yet as he stood before the unassuming doors of the shelter, his usual confidence faltered. This visit wasn't part of a business venture or some charitable PR stunt. It was an uncharacteristic whim driven by something he couldn't quite articulate, a feeling that had gnawed at him since he'd received a vague call from his old college friend, now a volunteer at the shelter. Wrapped in his expensive cashmere coat, Alex hesitated before entering. Inside, the atmosphere was warm, but carried the scent of old furniture and the faint aroma of soup being ladled out to those in need. He scanned the room, his sharp eyes observing clusters of people bundled in donated clothing, sharing quiet conversations. It was a world far removed from his penthouse office suites and luxury dinners. And then, amidst the crowd, he saw her, Emily, his ex-wife, the woman he had loved deeply and married in a whirlwind romance only to lose after a tumultuous year. She stood in the corner, holding a newborn baby wrapped snugly in a faded blanket. Alex's breath caught in his chest, his polished exterior momentarily shattered. He hadn't seen Emily since their bitter divorce 12 months ago. She had disappeared from his life entirely, leaving behind a void he had buried under work and wealth. The sight of her now, standing in this humble shelter, holding an infant, was surreal. Her once radiant face was marked with exhaustion, and her clothes, though clean, spoke of hard times. Yet there was a resilience in her posture, a quiet strength that made her look every bit as beautiful as the day they'd met. Alex's feet moved on their own, carrying him toward her. With each step, his mind raced with questions. Who was the baby? Was it hers? Had she remarried? Emily, he said softly, his voice cracking with an emotion he hadn't felt in years. Emily looked up, her tired eyes widening in shock as they met his. She instinctively clutched the baby closer, her protective stance speaking volumes. Alex, she whispered, her voice a mix of surprise and guardedness. For a moment they simply stared at each other, the world around them fading into a blur. Then, Alex's gaze shifted to the baby in her arms, a tiny bundle with soft, rosy cheeks and eyes that fluttered open briefly, revealing a strikingly familiar shade of green. His heart dropped. "Is that?" he began, his voice trailing off as he struggled to form the words. Emily hesitated, her lips pressing into a thin line. Her eyes darted around the room as if searching for an escape. Finally, she let out a sigh, her shoulders sagging under the weight of unspoken truths. "Yes," she said quietly, meeting his gaze with a mix of defiance and vulnerability. "This is your son, Alex." The words hit him like a thunderclap, reverberating through his very core. His son? A surge of emotions, shock, disbelief, guilt, and an overwhelming sense of longing coursed through him. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice tinged with hurt. Emily's eyes flashed with anger, her voice rising just enough to remain discreet in the crowded room. "Because you were too busy running your empire to care about anything else. Because I didn't think you'd want to know. And because I couldn't bear to see you reject him." Her words cut deep, each one a dagger of truth. Alex opened his mouth to respond but found himself at a loss. She was right, at least in part. During their marriage, he had been consumed by his work, prioritizing deals and deadlines over their relationship. But this was something he couldn't ignore. He took a deep breath, his voice softening. "Emily, I didn't know. If I had—" She interrupted, her tone sharp but not unkind. "It doesn't matter now, Alex. What's done is done. I've been raising him on my own and we've been fine. We don't need your pity or your money." "It's not about pity," Alex said firmly, his eyes locking onto hers. "It's about doing what's right. He's my son too, and I want to be a part of his life." Emily's expression softened, but the wariness didn't leave her eyes. "Words are easy, Alex. Actions aren't." "I'll prove it," he said without hesitation. "Just Give me a chance." For a long moment, Emily said nothing, her gaze shifting between Alex and the sleeping baby in her arms. Finally, she nodded, though the skepticism in her eyes remained. "All right," she said quietly. "But if you're serious about this, you'll have to earn it. Both of us." Alex nodded, a newfound determination settling in his chest. As he looked at the tiny bundle in Emily's arms, he felt something shift within him. This wasn't just about redemption or making amends. It was about building something new, something real. And for the first time in years, Alex Hunt felt truly alive. The following evening, Alex couldn't get the image of Emily holding their son out of his mind. That night, for the first time in years, he couldn't focus on work. His penthouse apartment, typically a sanctuary of sleek modern lines and serene solitude, felt cavernous and cold. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional hum of the city below. He sat at his desk, a glass of untouched scotch in hand, staring at the family photo taken at their wedding. Emily's radiant smile stood out, her eyes filled with a hope he now realized he had taken for granted. A pang of guilt twisted in his chest. How had he let things deteriorate so badly? The next day, Alex resolved to visit the shelter again. He wasn't sure if Emily would even agree to speak with him, but he had to try. He needed answers, not just for himself, but for the tiny life he now knew existed. When he arrived, the shelter was quieter than it had been the day before. Volunteers moved about efficiently, sorting donations and preparing meals. Alex spotted Emily sitting in a modest lounge area, cradling their son who was fussing lightly. "Emily," Alex called softly, approaching her cautiously. She looked up, her expression unreadable. After a moment's hesitation, she motioned for him to sit. "What do you want, Alex?" she asked, her tone resigned but not unkind. "I want to understand," he said earnestly. "I want to know what happened after you left. Why you didn't tell me about him." Emily sighed, adjusting the baby in her arms. "You want the truth?" "Yes," Alex said without hesitation. She nodded, taking a deep breath. "After the divorce, I thought I could start over. I got a small apartment and a part-time job at a cafe. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get by. Then, a few months later, I found out I was pregnant." Her voice faltered for a moment, but she pressed on. "I thought about calling you. I even picked up the phone a dozen times. But every time I convinced myself it was a bad idea. You were so consumed by work, by your empire, I didn't think you'd care." Alex opened his mouth to protest, but she held up a hand, stopping him. "And maybe I was scared," she admitted. "Scared that you'd reject him, that he'd grow up feeling unwanted. I didn't want that for him, so I decided to do it on my own." Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken pain. Alex's throat tightened as he imagined the struggles she must have faced. Working, preparing for a baby, all while feeling utterly alone. "Emily, I never would have." "Wouldn't you?" she interrupted, her voice sharp. "Be honest, Alex. When we were married, you could barely make time for me. What would have been different if I'd told you about him? Would you have dropped everything and been there for us?" Her words stung because they were true. Alex had been so focused on his career that he had neglected their marriage, pushing Emily away without even realizing it. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm here now, and I want to make things right." Emily shook her head, a bitter smile playing on her lips. "It's not that simple, Alex. Raising a child isn't something you can just step into when it's convenient." "I know," he said, his tone firm, "but I want to try. I want to be there for him. For both of you." Emily studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "Do you have any idea what it's been like? Juggling bills, working double shifts, wondering how I'm going to afford formula or diapers?" Her voice cracked, and Alex felt a wave of guilt wash over him. "I sold everything of value," she continued, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Even my wedding ring. And do you know what I told myself when I sold it? That it didn't matter because it wasn't a symbol of love anymore. It was just a piece of metal." Alex's heart clenched at her words. The wedding ring he had given her, a beautiful piece custom designed to symbolize their love, had been reduced to a lifeline for survival. "I'm so sorry, Emily," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I can't change the past, but I can help now. Please let me help." She looked down at their son who had fallen asleep in her arms. For a moment her expression softened, and Alex saw a flicker of the woman he had once loved. "It's not about the money, Alex," she said quietly. "It's about trust, and right now, I don't know if I can trust you. Her words hit him like a punch to the gut, but he nodded, accepting the truth. Then I'll earn it, he said. Whatever it takes. Emily didn't respond, but the silence between them was no longer heavy with animosity. It was tentative, fragile, a small step towards something neither of them could yet define. As Alex left the shelter that evening, he made a silent vow to himself. He would do whatever it took to prove to Emily and to their son that he was worthy of their trust and love. For the first time in years, Alex Hunt wasn't thinking about profits or deals. He was thinking about family. For the next few days, Alex found himself unable to focus on work. Meetings blurred together, phone calls went unanswered, and even his assistant, Clara, noticed his unusual distraction. She hesitated to bring it up at first, but eventually mustered the courage. "Mr. Hunt," Clara said one morning, placing a stack of files on his desk, "you've been distracted lately. Is everything all right?" Alex looked up from his untouched laptop, rubbing the back of his neck. "I've just got a lot on my mind, Clara. Personal stuff." She nodded, her expression softening. "If you need some time off, we can manage things here." Alex waved her off, though the idea lingered in his mind. Time off. It was something he hadn't considered in years, always convinced that the company couldn't function without him. But now, for the first time, he saw the futility in that belief. By the end of the week, Alex decided to take a step back from his professional life. He delegated responsibilities to his senior team and informed Clara he would be unreachable for a while. "Only call me if it's an emergency," he said, ignoring her surprised expression. His first stop was the shelter. This time, he didn't go in with an agenda. He didn't try to confront Emily or push for answers. Instead, he volunteered. The staff at the shelter were initially skeptical. A billionaire CEO volunteering at a homeless shelter wasn't something they saw every day. But Alex was persistent, showing up each morning in casual clothes and rolling up his sleeves. He scrubbed floors, served meals, and even took on the unglamorous task of cleaning the bathrooms. Emily watched from a distance, unsure of what to make of his sudden involvement. Part of her wanted to believe he was sincere, but another part worried this was just a temporary effort, a way to assuage his guilt. One afternoon, as Alex unloaded boxes of donated supplies, Linda, one of the senior staff members, approached him. "You've been coming here every day," she said, crossing her arms. "What's your angle?" Alex paused, setting down a box of canned goods. "No angle," he said. "I'm just trying to understand." "Understand what?" "Emily," he admitted, "and my son. I want to know what they've been through, what I missed." Linda studied him for a long moment before nodding. "She's been through hell, you know. Raising a child on her own, working herself to the bone, barely making ends meet. And now you show up out of nowhere and expect her to just let you back into her life?" "I don't expect anything," Alex said quietly, "but I need to try." Linda's expression softened. "If you're serious about this, you've got a long road ahead of you. Emily doesn't trust easily, and she's fiercely protective of her son." "I know," Alex said, "and I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Over the next few weeks, Alex continued his routine at the shelter. Slowly, the staff began to warm up to him. He listened to their stories, learned about the challenges they faced, and even used his resources to address some of the shelter's pressing needs. But his real focus was Emily and their son. One evening, as the shelter was winding down for the night, Alex spotted Emily sitting in the common area, feeding their son. He hesitated before approaching, unsure if she would welcome his presence. "Do you mind if I sit?" he asked, his voice tentative. Emily looked up, her expression guarded. After a moment, she nodded. Alex sat across from her, watching as she gently wiped their son's mouth with a cloth. The baby cooed softly, his tiny hands grasping at Emily's fingers. "He's incredible," Alex said, his voice filled with awe. Emily glanced at him, a small smile tugging at her lips. "He is." They sat in silence for a while, the tension between them slowly easing. "Why are you doing this, Alex?" Emily asked finally. "Why now?" Alex took a deep breath. "Because I made a mistake. A lot of mistakes. I was so focused on building my career, on proving myself, that I lost sight of what really mattered. And now, seeing you and him, it's like a wake-up call. I don't want to miss any more." Emily studied him, her eyes searching for any hint of insincerity. "Words are easy," she said softly. "I know," Alex replied. "That's why I'm not just saying them. I'm here, Emily. I'm here to prove to you and to him that I can be better." Her expression softened, though her guard remained up. "It's going to take more than a few weeks at a shelter to fix what's broken, Alex." "I know," he said, his tone resolute. "And I'm not going anywhere." As Emily turned her attention back to their son, Alex felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't much, but it was a start, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was moving in the right direction. The days following Alex's conversation with Emily were a mixture of progress and hesitation. While she appreciated his efforts at the shelter, her heart remained cautious, guarded against the possibility of more pain. Alex, however, was undeterred. For every small interaction they had, he saw it as a step closer to mending their fractured relationship. Alex decided to focus on the little things, believing they might pave the way for something bigger. He would offer to take over tasks that Emily usually handled, like organizing the shelter's inventory or assisting with the evening meal service. Though Emily often declined his offers, there were moments when her defenses seemed to waver, giving him a sliver of hope. One chilly evening, Alex noticed Emily struggling to quiet their son, who had been unusually fussy. She paced the common room, bouncing the baby gently in her arms, her exhaustion evident in the droop of her shoulders. "Can I try?" Alex asked, stepping forward hesitantly. Emily hesitated, her instincts screaming to keep control, but the weariness won out, and she nodded, handing the baby over carefully. Alex cradled the tiny boy in his arms, his movements surprisingly gentle. He began to hum a soft tune, swaying slightly as he rocked the baby. Within minutes, the baby's cries softened, his little fists unclenching as he nestled into Alex's chest. Emily watched, a lump forming in her throat. It was a simple moment, but it stirred something deep within her, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and an aching sadness for what could have been. "You're good with him," she said quietly. Alex looked up, his expression soft. "I'm trying to be." For the first time in years, they shared a moment of quiet understanding. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet, but it was a start. The next day, Alex approached Linda with an idea. "I want to do something for the shelter," he said. "Something more than just donating supplies." Linda raised an eyebrow. "What do you have in mind?" Alex hesitated. "A renovation, the building's outdated, and there's so much more we could do to help the residents feel safe and comfortable. I'll cover the costs." Linda crossed her arms, her gaze skeptical. "This isn't about impressing Emily, is it?" "It's about making a difference," Alex replied earnestly. "And yes, I won't lie. Part of me hopes she'll see that I'm serious about being here. But this isn't just for her. It's for everyone who relies on this place." After a moment of consideration, Linda nodded. "All right, but if you're doing this, you're doing it with our input. This is our community, and we know what it needs." "Deal," Alex said, relieved. The project began almost immediately. Alex worked closely with the shelter's staff, consulting them on every detail. They repainted the walls, replaced the worn-out furniture, and upgraded the kitchen and bathrooms. He also installed a small play area for the children and created a quiet room where parents could decompress. Emily watched the transformation with mixed emotions. On one hand, she was grateful for the improvements. The shelter had never looked better, and the residents were visibly uplifted by the changes. On the other hand, she couldn't shake the nagging doubt about Alex's motives. One evening, as they stood in the newly renovated common room, Emily decided to confront him. "Why are you doing all of this, Alex?" she asked, her tone guarded. He turned to face her, his expression earnest. "Because I can. Because I should have done more for you, for us, a long time ago." Emily crossed her arms. "You think money can fix everything?" "No," Alex said quickly. "I know it can't, but it's what I have, and I want to use it to help. Not just for you and our son, but for everyone here." His sincerity caught her off guard. For the first time, she saw a glimpse of the man she had fallen in love with, the man who had once made her believe in a future together. "I don't know if I can trust you yet," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Alex nodded, his gaze unwavering. "I understand, but I'm not going anywhere, Emily. I'll keep showing up every day until you believe that." Her heart ached at his words, torn between hope and fear. She wanted to believe him, but trust was a fragile thing, and theirs had been shattered. As the weeks went by, Alex continued to prove himself. He became a fixture at the shelter, not just as a benefactor but as a volunteer. He spent hours playing with the children, helping residents with their job applications, and even organizing workshops to teach basic financial literacy. Slowly, the residents began to warm up to him. They saw him not as a billionaire swooping in to save the day, but as someone who genuinely cared about their struggles. Emily couldn't ignore the changes in him. He was more patient, more grounded, and more present than she had ever seen him. And while her walls remained firmly in place, she couldn't help but wonder if there was a chance for them to rebuild what had been lost. One afternoon, as Alex helped her organize donations, he turned to her with a question that caught her off guard. "Would you let me take him for a day?" he asked, nodding toward their son, who was napping nearby. Emily stiffened. "What do you mean?" "I want to spend time with him," Alex said gently. "Just the two of us. I want to get to know him better." Her instinct was to say no, to keep her son close and protected. But as she looked at Alex, she saw the earnestness in his eyes, the quiet plea for a chance to be a father. "I'll think about it," she said finally, her tone measured. Alex nodded, accepting her answer without protest. He knew he had to earn her trust, and he was willing to be patient. That evening, as Emily watched Alex play with their son, she felt a flicker of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time: hope. The day Emily finally allowed Alex to take their son Ethan for an afternoon outing was a turning point, not just for Alex but for their entire fragile dynamic. Her decision came after weeks of observing Alex's unwavering commitment, though she made it clear that her trust was still tentative. "You'll bring him back by 6, Emily instructed, her tone firm as she handed Ethan's diaper bag to Alex. "And don't forget, he gets cranky if he doesn't nap around 2. Alex nodded, taking the bag and gently picking up his son. "I promise, Emily. I've got this." Ethan, now more comfortable in Alex's presence, giggled as he reached for his father's face. Alex's heart swelled at the sound, a bittersweet reminder of all the moments he'd missed. He kissed the top of Ethan's head, silently vowing to make up for lost time. Their first stop was a nearby park. Alex had planned everything meticulously, wanting the day to be perfect. He set up a small blanket under a shady tree and brought out a collection of toys to keep Ethan entertained. As his son crawled around, exploring the grass with wide-eyed curiosity, Alex marveled at the little boy's energy and wonder. "You've got your mother's spirit," Alex said softly, watching Ethan try to grab a butterfly that fluttered past. Fearless and curious. It wasn't long before other children noticed Ethan and wandered over. Alex found himself in the unexpected position of supervising a small group of toddlers, laughing as they shared toys and babbled in their own language. One of the mothers approached, smiling warmly. "Your son is adorable," she said. "How old is he?" 10 months, Alex replied, pride evident in his voice. She tilted her head, studying him. "You're a natural with kids. You must spend a lot of time with him." Alex's smile faltered slightly. "I'm trying to make up for lost time." The woman nodded, sensing the weight behind his words. "Well, you're doing great. He's lucky to have you." As the afternoon wore on, Alex fed Ethan a snack and gently rocked him to sleep for his nap. Sitting under the tree with his son nestled against him, Alex felt a peace he hadn't known in years. For the first time, his priorities felt clear. This, being a father, being present, was what truly mattered. When they returned to the shelter, Ethan was wide awake and babbling happily. Emily was waiting in the common room, her anxiety evident as she paced near the window. When she saw them, relief washed over her face, though she quickly masked it with a neutral expression. "How was he?" she asked, reaching for Ethan. Alex handed their son to her carefully. "He was great. We went to the park. He played, he napped. Everything went smoothly." Emily inspected Ethan as if ensuring he was unharmed, her motherly instincts on high alert. Satisfied, she nodded. "Thank you for bringing him back on time." Alex chuckled softly. "I wouldn't dare be late." Her lips twitched in what might have been the hint of a smile, but she quickly turned her attention back to Ethan. "Did you have fun, sweetheart?" Ethan responded with a string of excited babbles, waving his tiny hands as if recounting his adventures. Alex watched the interaction with a mixture of pride and longing, his heart aching to be part of moments like this every day. "Emily," he began cautiously, "thank you for trusting me with him today. It means a lot." She looked up, her expression guarded but less icy than before. "Don't make me regret it." "I won't," Alex said earnestly. "I promise." Over the next few weeks, Alex's relationship with Ethan continued to grow. He became a regular fixture at the shelter, spending hours with his son while also contributing to its operations. The residents, initially skeptical of his presence, began to warm to him as they saw his genuine efforts. One evening, as Alex was helping Ethan take his first wobbly steps in the common room, a resident named Martha approached Emily. "That man of yours is something else," Martha said, nodding toward Alex. "He's not," Emily started but stopped herself. "What do you mean?" "I mean he's good with that boy of yours and with everyone here. You don't see men like that every day." Emily didn't respond immediately. She watched as Alex cheered Ethan on, his laughter filling the room as their son took another tentative step. For the first time, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, Alex could truly be the father Ethan deserved. But Emily's doubts lingered, fueled by the pain of their past. One evening, as she sat alone in her small room at the shelter, she found herself replaying their last fight before the divorce. The memories were raw, the wounds still fresh. She had loved Alex deeply, but his priorities had always seemed to lie elsewhere. The next day, she approached Alex as he was fixing a broken chair in the dining area. "Why now?" she asked bluntly, her arms crossed. "Why are you doing all of this now? After everything?" Alex set down his tools and stood, his gaze steady. "Because I finally realized what matters. Losing you and Ethan was the wake-up call I needed. I can't change the past, but I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." Emily studied him, searching for any hint of insincerity. "You say that, but how do I know you won't go back to your old ways once things get hard?" "You don't," Alex admitted. "All I can do is prove to you every day that I'm here for the long haul, for you and for Ethan." His vulnerability caught her off guard. For the first time, she saw the depth of his regret and the determination in his eyes, and while her heart wasn't ready to fully let him in, she couldn't deny the progress he had made. That evening, as Emily rocked Ethan to sleep, she allowed herself to imagine a future where Alex was truly part of their lives. It was a frightening thought, full of uncertainties, but as she watched her son's peaceful face, she knew she had to at least consider the possibility, for his sake, if not her own. When she returned to the common room, Alex was still there, cleaning up after dinner service. She hesitated before approaching him. "Alex," she said softly. He turned, surprised to see her. "Yeah? Thank you. For everything you've been doing, for Ethan, for the shelter." She paused, gathering her courage, and for trying. Alex's expression softened, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "I'll keep trying, Emily, as long as it takes." She nodded, her heart still cautious but slightly more open than before. Good. As she walked away, Alex felt a sense of progress, a small but significant step toward the redemption he so desperately sought. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself to hope that they might one day rebuild the family they had lost. The days that followed were filled with small, significant moments that began to bridge the gap between Alex and Emily. Trust, fractured by years of miscommunication and hurt, was gradually being rebuilt, not through grand gestures but through quiet consistency. For Emily, these gestures were like stitches, mending the wounds Alex had once inflicted on her heart. Alex immersed himself in both fatherhood and the shelter's operations. He became a fixture at the community meals, serving food alongside the volunteers and listening to the residents' stories. His presence, initially met with skepticism, was now welcomed. People began to see him not as a distant billionaire, but as a man trying to right his wrongs. One afternoon, Emily found Alex repairing a broken swing in the shelter's small playground. Ethan sat nearby on a blanket, babbling to himself as he clutched a brightly colored toy. Alex worked with a quiet determination, his focus split between fixing the swing and keeping an eye on their son. "You've been busy," Emily remarked, approaching him. Alex looked up, brushing sweat from his forehead. "This swing's seen better days. Figured I'd give it a little TLC." Emily crossed her arms, leaning against the fence. "You're not half bad at this whole hands-on thing." He chuckled. "I've had a good teacher." His gaze flicked to Ethan, who had managed to roll onto his side and was now attempting to crawl toward them. Alex's smile widened. "He's growing so fast." Emily nodded, her expression softening. "He is." They stood in silence for a moment, watching Ethan's determined efforts. It was a peaceful scene, one that felt almost normal. Emily realized she couldn't remember the last time she had felt this sense of calm around Alex. As the weeks passed, Alex's relationship with Ethan flourished. He learned to navigate the challenges of fatherhood, diaper changes, late-night feedings, and temper tantrums included. Each small victory, whether it was getting Ethan to sleep or hearing his first laugh, felt monumental to Alex. He cherished these moments, knowing they were a privilege he hadn't earned but was determined to deserve. Emily, too, began to notice the changes in Alex. He was no longer the aloof, work-obsessed man she had married. This Alex was patient, attentive, and present. He showed up every day, not just for Ethan, but for her as well. And while she wasn't ready to fully let her guard down, she found herself softening toward him. One evening, after putting Ethan to bed, Emily found Alex sitting on the shelter's rooftop garden. The space, once barren and unused, had been transformed into a peaceful retreat thanks to Alex's efforts. String lights twinkled overhead, casting a warm glow over the potted plants and benches. "Mind if I join you?" Emily asked hesitantly. Alex looked up, surprised but pleased. Of course. She sat beside him, the cool night air brushing against her skin. For a moment neither of them spoke, the silence comfortable rather than strained. "This place looks amazing," Emily said finally, gesturing to the garden. "You've done a great job with it." Alex shrugged modestly. "It was a team effort. The residents helped with the planting." Emily smiled, her gaze drifting to the skyline. "It's nice, peaceful." Alex hesitated before speaking. "Emily, thank you for giving me this chance. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm grateful." She turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "You've been doing a lot of good, Alex, for Ethan, for the shelter. But this isn't just about proving yourself to me. It's about being the kind of person Ethan can look up to." "I know," Alex said earnestly, "and I want to be that person for him, for you." Emily looked away, her heart conflicted. She wanted to believe him, to trust that the man sitting beside her was truly different from the one who had hurt her. But trust wasn't something she could give freely. It had to be earned. The turning point came during a particularly chaotic day at the shelter. A plumbing issue had caused a temporary shutdown of the kitchen, leaving the residents without hot meals. Emily was overwhelmed, trying to coordinate repairs and ensure everyone was taken care of. Alex stepped in without hesitation. He arranged for a local catering company to deliver food, covered the cost without mentioning it, and spent the entire afternoon helping distribute meals to the residents. His calm demeanor and problem-solving skills were a stark contrast to the man Emily had once known. That evening, as the chaos subsided, Emily approached Alex. He was sitting in the common room, cradling a sleeping Ethan in his arms. "Thank you," she said softly. Alex looked up, surprised. "For what?" "For today, for everything," she replied. "I don't know how I would have managed without you." He smiled gently. "You don't have to do it alone, Emily, not anymore." Her chest tightened at his words. For the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, she could let Alex back into her life. In the days that followed, Emily found herself lowering her defenses little by little. She began to share more of her thoughts and feelings with Alex, opening up about the struggles she had faced during their time apart. And Alex, for his part, listened without judgment, offering support and understanding. Their journey was far from over, but they were moving in the right direction. Each step forward was a testament to the power of redemption and the resilience of the human spirit. And as they sat together one evening watching Ethan take his first unsteady steps, Emily realized that maybe, just maybe, they could build something new, something stronger, something lasting. As the days turned into weeks, Emily and Alex found themselves navigating a delicate new chapter. While Alex's actions were steadily building trust, the shadows of their past continued to linger, unspoken, but ever present. It was as if a glass wall separated them, transparent but unyielding, holding back emotions too raw to confront. For Emily, the memories of their tumultuous marriage were hard to shake. She recalled the arguments that echoed through their sprawling penthouse, the nights she spent alone while Alex worked late, and the crushing loneliness that had consumed her. She had loved Alex deeply, but his ambition had often felt like a rival she couldn't compete with. Now, seeing the man he was striving to become, she couldn't help but wonder if they could truly move forward without addressing the wounds they had inflicted on each other. Alex, too, wrestled with his guilt. Every time he looked at Ethan, he felt the weight of missed milestones and lost time. His son's laughter was a bittersweet reminder of the moments he hadn't been there for. The first cries, the first smile, the countless nights Emily had faced alone. He knew he couldn't erase the past, but he was determined to atone for it. even if it meant revisiting the pain he had long buried. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, Emily approached Alex in the shelter's garden. He was sitting on a bench, watching Ethan toddle around with a newfound sense of independence. The sight brought a soft smile to her lips, but her heart was heavy with the conversation she knew they needed to have. "Alex," she began, her voice tentative. He turned to her, his expression warm but cautious. "Hey, everything okay?" Emily hesitated, then nodded toward Ethan, who was now engrossed in examining a patch of daisies. "Can we talk?" Alex's brow furrowed slightly, but he nodded. Of course. They sat together in the quiet garden, the evening air cool, but not cold. For a moment, Emily didn't speak, her gaze fixed on Ethan as he explored his surroundings. "I've been thinking," she said finally, her voice steady but soft, "about us, about everything that's happened." Alex leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees. "I'm listening." Emily took a deep breath. "I need to understand, Alex. I need to know why things fell apart between us, why you prioritized everything else over our marriage." Her words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of unspoken pain. Alex exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair as he gathered his thoughts. "When I look back at who I was back then," he began, his tone laced with regret, "I see a man who thought he could have it all without making sacrifices. I thought my work, building my company, chasing success, was how I could provide for us, how I could prove my worth. But in doing that, I lost sight of what really mattered." He paused, his gaze shifting to Ethan, who was now attempting to pluck a flower. "I didn't see what I was doing to you, Emily. I didn't see how my choices were hurting you. And by the time I realized it, it was too late. You were gone." Emily swallowed hard, the raw honesty in his words cutting through her defenses. "You left me, Alex. I begged you to be present, to see me, and you chose work every time." "I know," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "and I hate myself for it. I hate that I let you down, that I made you feel like you didn't matter. Because the truth is, you were the only thing that ever mattered." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears as she met his gaze. "Do you know how hard it was? To pack up and leave, not knowing how I'd make it on my own? To find out I was pregnant and realize you wouldn't be there to share it with me?" Alex's jaw tightened, and he looked away, his shoulders slumping under the weight of her words. "I failed you," he admitted. "In every way that counts, and I can never take that back." Silence enveloped them, the only sound the soft rustle of leaves and Ethan's quiet giggles. Finally, Emily spoke, her voice trembling but resolute. "I don't need you to take it back," she said. "What's done is done, but if we're going to move forward, if we're going to build something new, you need to prove to me that you've changed, not just for me, but for Ethan." Alex nodded, his expression earnest. "I will. Every day for the rest of my life I'll prove it to you. You and Ethan are my family, and I'm not going to let anything come before that again." Emily studied him for a long moment, searching his face for any trace of the man she had once loved, and the man she had walked away from. What she saw was vulnerability, sincerity, and a determination that touched something deep within her. "Okay," she said finally, "but this is going to take time, Alex. I need to see it, to feel it, before I can trust you again." "You'll have all the time you need," he promised. In the days that followed, their conversations became more open, more honest. They revisited the painful moments of their past, but instead of tearing them apart, these discussions brought them closer. They began to understand each other in ways they hadn't before, their shared vulnerability creating a foundation for the relationship they were slowly rebuilding. One evening, as they sat together in the common room, Alex turned to Emily with a question that had been weighing on his mind. "Why didn't you tell me about Ethan?" he asked gently. "I know I wasn't there, but I could have been, if I'd known." Emily hesitated, her fingers tracing patterns on the armrest of her chair. "I wanted to," she admitted, "but after everything that happened between us, I didn't think you'd want to know. And part of me was scared that you'd see him as an obligation instead of a blessing." Alex reached over, placing his hand over hers. "Ethan is not an obligation. He's my son, and I'm so grateful for him, for both of you." Her eyes met his, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other, not as the people they had been, but as the people they were becoming. The days that followed their heartfelt conversation marked a turning point for Alex and Emily. It wasn't as if all the pain and resentment had magically disappeared, but for the first time, they had taken a step toward understanding each other. Emily had opened a window into her heart, and Alex was determined to prove himself worthy of the trust she was tentatively placing in him. For Emily, forgiveness wasn't something she could give lightly. It wasn't just about accepting an apology. It was about believing that Alex had truly changed. She wasn't ready to let him back into her heart entirely, but she was willing to let him try. And for Alex, that was enough. For now, Alex's first priority became demonstrating his commitment through consistent actions. He continued showing up at the shelter, not just for Emily and Ethan, but for the other families as well. He volunteered to help wherever he could, whether it was organizing donations, reading to children, or repairing broken furniture. The shelter staff began to see him as more than just a wealthy CEO. He became an integral part of their community. Emily noticed the difference. The Alex she saw now was a far cry from the man she had married. He was patient, kind, and willing to get his hands dirty, qualities she hadn't associated with him during their marriage. Yet she couldn't help but wonder if this change was permanent, or if it was just another fleeting attempt to win her back. One afternoon, as Emily stood in the kitchen preparing meals for the shelter's residents, Alex walked in carrying a box of fresh produce. "I thought I'd contribute," he said, setting the box on the counter. "Linda mentioned the shelter was running low on fresh ingredients." Emily glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," he replied, "but I wanted to. I want to help, Emily, in whatever way I can." She studied him for a moment, her hands still as she held a knife poised over a carrot. Finally, she nodded. "Thank you." It was a small exchange, but for Alex it was a step forward. Every interaction with Emily felt like a chance to prove himself, and he was determined not to squander it. One evening, Alex proposed an idea that caught Emily off guard. "I've been thinking," he said as they sat together in the common room, Ethan asleep in his crib nearby. "What if we set up a fund for the shelter? Something sustainable that can support it long term?" Emily raised an eyebrow, her skepticism evident. "And you'd want to be involved in that?" "Absolutely," Alex said earnestly. "This place has become more than just a shelter for me. It's a home, a second chance. I want to give back, not just for you and Ethan, but for everyone who relies on this place." His words struck a chord with Emily. She had spent years pouring her heart into the shelter, and the thought of securing its future was deeply appealing. Still, she hesitated. "That's a big commitment," she said cautiously. "Are you sure you're ready for something like that?" "I've never been more sure of anything," Alex replied. "This isn't just about money, Emily. It's about making a difference. Together." For the first time, Emily allowed herself to consider the possibility that Alex might truly be changing. His efforts weren't just about her. They were about building something meaningful for others, and that realization softened the edges of her doubt. One weekend, Alex surprised Emily and Ethan with a day out. He rented a small picnic area at a nearby park, complete with a playground for Ethan and a quiet spot for them to talk. Emily was hesitant at first, unsure if she was ready for something so personal, but she agreed. The day turned out to be unexpectedly pleasant. Ethan was delighted by the playground, his laughter ringing out as he climbed, slid, and explored. Alex played with him, his joy evident as he chased Ethan around, pretending to be a playful monster. Emily watched from a distance, her heart tugging at the sight of them together. As the afternoon wore on, Alex joined Emily on the blanket she had spread under a shady tree. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching Ethan chase a butterfly. "He's amazing," Alex said softly. "You've done such a good job with him, Emily." She glanced at him, her expression a mix of pride and sadness. "I've done my best, but it hasn't been easy." "I can only imagine," Alex replied. "I wish I'd been there. I missed so much." Emily looked away, her fingers plucking at the edge of the blanket. "You can't change the past, Alex, but you can be here now. That's what matters." Her words were a quiet acknowledgement, a small step toward letting him in. Alex didn't push or press for more. Instead, he simply nodded, letting her know he understood. Over the following weeks, Alex continued to prove himself. He became a regular fixture at the shelter, working alongside Emily and the staff to improve the lives of the residents. He organized a fundraiser that brought in more donations than the shelter had seen in years, and he used his connections to secure partnerships with local businesses for job training programs. Emily began to see the depth of his commitment, not just to her and Ethan, but to the community they had built. Her walls, though still standing, began to show cracks. She found herself smiling more, laughing at Alex's jokes, and even allowing herself to imagine a future where they could rebuild what they had lost. One evening, as they worked together to prepare for a shelter event, Emily turned to Alex with a question that had been on her mind. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked, her tone curious but not accusatory. "Is it just guilt?" Alex paused, setting down the stack of flyers he had been arranging. "It started as guilt," he admitted. "But now, it's so much more than that. This place, these people, you and Ethan, you've given me a purpose I didn't know I was missing. I don't want to go back to the man I was. I want to be better for all of us." Emily searched his face, her heart wavering. She wanted to believe him, to trust that this transformation was real. And while the scars of their past still lingered, she couldn't deny that Alex was showing her a side of himself she had never seen before. "I don't know if I can fully forgive you yet," she said honestly, "but I'm willing to keep trying." "That's all I could ever ask for," Alex replied, his voice steady. In that moment, Emily felt a small spark of hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. It wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like it might be worth the effort. As the days turned into weeks, Alex and Emily found themselves in a rhythm that felt oddly natural. They weren't a perfect family, not yet, but the barriers between them were slowly dissolving. Alex's continued presence at the shelter, his unwavering commitment to Ethan, and his growing bond with Emily were undeniable signs of his transformation. For Alex, the process of rebuilding their relationship was humbling. He realized that it wasn't about grand gestures or instant solutions. It was about being present and showing up every single day. Whether it was helping with mundane tasks at the shelter, reading bedtime stories to Ethan, or simply sitting with Emily after a long day, he was learning that love was in the small, consistent acts of care. Emily, too, was changing. Her initial skepticism was gradually giving way to something softer, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. She began to see Alex not as the man who had hurt her, but as someone trying to make amends, someone genuinely striving to be better. And while her heart still held onto its protective armor, she started to let herself imagine a future where they could rebuild their family. One crisp autumn afternoon, Alex suggested they take a trip to the countryside. "It's not far," he said, his eyes lighting up with excitement. "I thought Ethan might enjoy some fresh air, and it could be a nice change of scenery for all of us." Emily hesitated. The idea of spending a day away from the shelter and alone with Alex felt like a significant step, but when she saw the hopeful expression on Ethan's face, as Alex described a farm with animals and wide-open fields, she couldn't say no. The drive to the farm was filled with Ethan's chatter, his excitement infectious as he asked questions about the animals they might see. Alex and Emily shared a few amused glances in the rearview mirror, the unspoken understanding between them growing stronger. When they arrived, Ethan was thrilled to see the animals up close. He laughed as he fed a goat and squealed with delight when a fluffy bunny nibbled on a carrot from his hand. Alex stayed close, guiding Ethan gently and sharing the experience with him. Emily watched from a distance, her heart swelling as she saw the love and care Alex poured into every interaction with their son. Later, as the sun dipped low in the sky, painting the fields in hues of gold and orange, Alex and Emily sat together on a wooden bench while Ethan played nearby. The air was cool and carried the faint scent of hay and earth, a peaceful contrast to the bustle of the city. "This was a good idea," Emily admitted, her voice soft. "Ethan needed this." Alex turned to her, his expression earnest. "So did we." She met his gaze, the vulnerability in his eyes taking her by surprise. For a moment, she saw a glimpse of the man she had fallen in love with all those years ago, the man who had once made her believe in fairy tales and happy endings. "I'm trying, Emily," he said, his tone quiet but firm. "I know I can't change the past, but I want to build a future with you and Ethan. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, I'm here." Emily's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to believe him, to trust that this version of Alex, the one who was patient, kind, and steadfast, was real. But trust was a fragile thing. and her heart still bore the scars of their shared history. "You're doing better," she said finally, her words measured. "I see that, but it's going to take more than a few good days to make up for what happened." Alex nodded, his expression unwavering. "I know, and I'm ready to prove myself, one day at a time." Their day at the farm marked a turning point in their relationship. Emily began to lower her guard, allowing Alex into moments of her life that she had once kept locked away. They started spending more time together outside the shelter, taking Ethan to the park, sharing meals, and even reminiscing about their past. The pain of their history was still there, but so was the possibility of something new. One evening, as they sat together on the shelter's rooftop garden, a space Alex had renovated for Emily, she turned to him with a question she had been holding back. "Why now, Alex?" she asked, her tone tinged with curiosity. "Why are you so determined to make this work?" He took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Because losing you was the wake-up call I didn't know I needed. I spent so long chasing success, thinking it would make me happy. But none of it matters without you and Ethan. You're my family, Emily, and I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." His words were raw, unfiltered, and they resonated deeply with Emily. She realized that Alex wasn't just saying what he thought she wanted to hear. He was speaking from a place of genuine regret and hope. The weeks that followed were a time of healing and growth. Alex continued to prove himself through his actions, and Emily found herself softening toward him in ways she hadn't thought possible. Their bond, once fractured by pain and betrayal, began to mend, strengthened by their shared love for Ethan and their commitment to building a better future. But even as they moved forward, Emily knew there were still challenges ahead. Forgiveness wasn't a destination, it was a journey, one they would have to navigate together. And while the road ahead was uncertain, she felt a glimmer of hope, a belief that maybe, just maybe, they could create something beautiful out of the broken pieces of their past. The morning light filtered through the windows of the shelter, casting a warm glow across the common room. Alex stood by the small kitchenette, carefully pouring cereal into Ethan's bowl, while the boy chattered on about his favorite storybook characters. Emily watched them from across the room, her heart swelling at the sight of their growing bond. It was moments like this, simple, unremarkable moments, that made her wonder if a future with Alex was truly possible. Ethan had taken to Alex in ways Emily hadn't expected. For a boy who had spent much of his young life without a father figure, he had embraced Alex with open arms. And Alex, to his credit, had risen to the challenge. He wasn't just present, he was invested. Whether it was helping Ethan with his reading, teaching him to ride a bike, or simply listening to his endless questions, Alex was proving himself to be the kind of father Ethan deserved. Later that day, as Emily walked through the bustling city streets with Alex and Ethan by her side, she felt an unfamiliar sense of normalcy. They stopped at a small cafe for lunch, sitting by the window and watching the world go by. Alex ordered Ethan a hot chocolate, complete with whipped cream and sprinkles, while Emily sipped on her coffee, the warmth spreading through her chest. "You've changed," Emily said suddenly, her words cutting through the quiet hum of the cafe. Alex looked up, his expression thoughtful. "I had to," he admitted. "I didn't like the man I was becoming. Losing you made me realize how much I needed to change, not just for you, but for myself." Emily nodded, her gaze drifting to Ethan, who was happily licking whipped cream off his spoon. "And for him," she added softly. "For him, most of all," Alex agreed. He reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers. "Emily, I know I've said this before, but I'm not the same man who let you down. I want to be better. For you, and for Ethan, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving that." That evening, back at the shelter, Emily sat on the rooftop garden Alex had created. The city lights sparkled in the distance, a reminder of the world beyond their small corner of the universe. Alex joined her, carrying a blanket and a cup of tea. "I thought you might need this," he said, draping the blanket over her shoulders. "Thanks," she murmured, her hands wrapping around the warm mug. They sat in silence for a while, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. Finally, Emily turned to Alex, her expression serious. "Do you ever think about what could have been? If we hadn't, if things had gone differently?" "All the time," Alex admitted, his voice tinged with regret. "But I also think about what can be. We can't change the past, Emily, but we can decide what we want the future to look like." Emily considered his words, her heart aching with the truth of them. She had spent so much time dwelling on the pain of their past that she had almost forgotten the possibility of a future. "What do you want the future to look like?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alex met her gaze, his eyes filled with hope. "I want us to be a family. You, me, and Ethan. I want to be there for every milestone, every laugh, every challenge. I want to build something real with you, Emily. Something that lasts." Her heart swelled at his words, but fear lingered in the corners of her mind. Trust was a fragile thing, and while Alex had made strides in earning it back, she knew it would take time. In the weeks that followed, Alex continued to show Emily that he was serious about building a future together. He worked tirelessly to support the shelter, using his resources to create sustainable programs for the residents. He became a constant presence in Ethan's life, earning the boy's trust and affection in ways that melted Emily's heart. But it wasn't just his actions that spoke volumes. It was the little moments, the way he looked at her with quiet admiration, the way he listened to her fears without judgment, the way he made her feel seen and valued. Slowly but surely, Emily found herself letting go of the walls she had built around her heart. One evening, as they sat together in the shelter's common room, Alex turned to Emily with a question that had been weighing on his mind. "Do you think we could ever start over?" he asked hesitantly. Emily looked at him, her heart pounding. "Start over?" "Not from scratch," Alex clarified, "but from where we are now. With everything we've learned, everything we've been through, do you think we could build something new?" Emily's eyes filled with tears, the weight of his words sinking in. She thought about the journey they had been on, the pain, the growth, the love that had never truly faded, and she realized that despite her fears, she wanted to try. "I think we can," she said softly, "but it's going to take time." "I've got all the time in the world," Alex replied, his voice steady. In the months that followed, Emily and Alex worked together to create the future they both dreamed of. It wasn't always easy. There were challenges, doubts, and moments of uncertainty. But through it all, they held on to each other and to the love that had brought them together in the first place. Ethan, too, thrived in the newfound stability of their family. His laughter filled their days, a reminder of the joy and resilience that had carried them through the darkest times. And as they stood together one evening, watching the city lights from the rooftop garden, Emily realized that she had found something she never thought possible: peace. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't without its flaws, but it was real. And for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to embrace the future, together. If this story touched your heart, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartfelt tales. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching. Thank you for watching.